Okay, well, of course religion is outdated in the 21st century. Most religious people, to respond, it's true that you may get many people saying they're religious, but none of them, in the first world at least, in the developed world, to first approximation, actually believe the doctrines of their faith. They like to be religious. They want to believe, to use something from the X-Files. They want to believe in believing. So that Catholics don't really believe that when a priest holds a wafer, it turns into the body of Christ. No one really believes that nonsense. I have, in the last week, spent more time talking to Jewish atheists than I can count. Most of the Jews I know are atheists, and they say it's perfectly reasonable to be Jewish atheists because there's other aspects of the Jewish religion they like. So the point is that the doctrines of religion are outdated, and that's for good reason. They were created by Bronze Age or Iron Age peasants who didn't even know the Earth orbited the sun. So the wisdom in those books is not wisdom at all. And people take the wisdom. In fact, we've actually learned something over the last 20 centuries, and science has taught us how the world works. Now, for science, the interesting thing as a scientist is that God is completely irrelevant to science. Most scientists don't spend enough time thinking about God to even know if they're atheists, because they try and understand how the world works, and God never enters into it. It's just completely irrelevant. And in fact, the more we've learned about the natural world, the more we've learned that you don't need any divine intervention to explain anything. As far as morality is concerned, and the person you want to be, which is really what I think is the heart of what religion, when religion provides many things for people, and we can't deny that. The question is, how can we take the things that people need, community, support, hope, and use the real world to build those quantities? Because religion, if you base your beliefs and your actions on myths that are incorrect, you're inevitably going to take irrational actions. And so what we want to do is what science does, which is force people's beliefs to conform to the evidence of reality rather than the other way around, and not assume the answers to questions before we even ask them, and use the rational world to build a global society, not an exclusionary society, but a global world where people can live together based on the reality that we're all humans sharing this planet, and we need to work together to build a better place. A morality based on rationality and not outmoded religious beliefs. A famous biologist once said every scientist is an atheist when they go in the laboratory. They don't think anyone is twiddling the knobs. They accept the fact that the evidence of the experiment will tell them what's going on. They don't think that someone's controlling it. So I don't define myself as an atheist. I should first say that. I define myself as an anti-theist. Namely, it would be presumptuous of me to say there's no purpose to the universe, because I can't prove that. I can't prove there's no God. I can't say definitively there's no God. What I can say definitively, however, is that I wouldn't want to live in a universe with one. Okay? And the reason for that is that I find that this question of meaning is an interesting question. And if science tells us that there's no objective meaning to the universe, no purpose or meaning, does that make our lives purposeless and meaningless? Absolutely not. Quite the contrary. It means the purpose and meaning in our lives is what we make. It makes what we do more important. It makes the compassion we show others more important. We're not being told what to do by some cosmic Saddam Hussein, who, by the way, in many religions doesn't just condemn you to torture while you're alive, but for all eternity. You do it because we derive meaning and, in fact, the recognition, not from religion that all humans have equal dignity, but from science, that we're all a common species. In fact, that there's nothing sacred, that we create compassion and action, and in fact that humans are no different than other animals in the sense of being evolved species, and we have to realize that we share the earth with them, and in fact those ideas allow us to address what are the real problems of the 21st century. And if we keep going back to this medieval or earlier kind of myths, we won't address that. In fact, I sort of take umbrage at this sister's remarks, because I don't think anything she said had anything to do with religion. She said understanding dignity, treating people with compassion, and then what people of religion do is they usurp that. They say, if you're not religious, you can't have any of that. But all of those ideas come from a rational view of who we are and how we should relate to others. The best example of tolerance and across cultures that I can think of is nearby here. in Geneva at the Large Hadron Collider. There's a machine that's built by people from 100 different countries, speaking a dozen different languages with many different religions and cultures, building these devices that have to work to a millionth of a meter. And it works because science brings people together. Science tells us that we are a common species and we can work together to make the world a better place. And I will close with a quote. I won't sing it, you'll be pleased to know. From Jacob Bronowski, who said, you know, the world is permeated through and through by science. And you can't turn it into a game merely by picking sides. Like it or not, the world is governed by science, the physical world. And if we want to deal with our real problems, we have to accept what nature is telling us instead of imposing our beliefs on nature. I think if you take the long term, you have a worse view of societies that have been run by religion in the long term of human history, from the Crusades and back before that. I think that you found that human freedom eventually arose with the enlightenment of knowledge, and in fact, open questioning, which is the hallmark of science. And in fact, if you want to call it the dialogue of faith and reason, the hallmark of science is that nothing is above question, including God. And the minute we make certain things sacred and not subject to question, we demean ourselves and we stop thinking. I also think I have to say, I think we're missing, we're deviating from the point of this discussion. The question isn't is religion important? Because that's an obvious thing. Religion is obviously important. So are nuclear weapons. The question is religion outmoded, and are nuclear weapons outmoded? And will the world be a better place without them? And the answer, both those, is yes. Okay, religion is very important, nuclear weapons are very important, but neither of them in the modern world serve a productive purpose. And so I think that I accept and don't need to debate the question of whether religion is an important part of the way the world is run. The question is, should it be, should it continue to be, and is it decreasing? And in fact, what also hasn't been pointed out is that in most places, in fact happily, monotonically in the first world, the people identifying themselves as religious is decreasing year by year. The first year in England, by the way, as you know from a recent poll, more than half the population finally acknowledged that they didn't have any religious affiliation. In the United States even, it's been decreasing in spite of the efficiency of competition. So I find it remarkable. So the idea is that science doesn't have any spirituality, which of course is wrong. If you want to get awe and the reason I write books, the reason I talk about science, look at a Hubble Space Telescope picture of the 400 billion galaxies in our universe. Look out and see galaxies 10 billion light years away that may once have had civilizations around them that are living, each of them as 100 billion stars. Look at what we learn about the universe. Look at how atoms work. Those things produce awe and wonder and mystery. The reason I'm a scientist is I love mysteries. And so to pretend that science is just dry and has no spirituality and therefore is somehow less significant than faith is just to misunderstand science and to demean it. And so the point, the discussion we can have is how wonderful and amazing the universe is. And I think we would share in that discussion. But to condemn science as being consumerism. Look, I'm an educator. I want to educate people because I want them to learn about how to live a better life and how the world works, and to be able to make their own decisions and to experience more joy, because the more you understand yourselves and the more you understand nature, I think, the more enriching life is. I think that you hit a key point, and I agree with you completely, that you can't condemn a whole population because of some individual, okay? But the difference is that there are no rule makers in science. There are no authorities. That's the hallmark of science. There's no such thing as a scientific authority. There are scientific experts. But the lowliest student can in fact disprove any. There's no chief scientist. There may be a chief rabbi. There may be a pope. But there's no chief scientist. We say, oh, what's the answer? How should we behave? That's the key facet of science that makes it so wonderful, is that there are no authorities. Now, of course, scientists, although many people wouldn't realize this, are actually people. And therefore, they have all the same foibles as anyone else, and they're scientists who abuse their science as well as every other aspect of their life. But the key aspect is there are no rule makers. Scientists would say that why is ultimately a stupid question. It doesn't, I mean, I think anyone here who's a parent knows that, you know, if you have a child, the ultimate answer to why is go to bed. And I think that whenever we say why, we really mean how. And so we can understand how the universe works, but why do we need to ask the question why? It may have no fundamental meaning. And so I don't think science presumes to answer that question. And if religion presumes to answer that question, I think inevitably it's proved itself not being able to do that. And in terms of the tree of knowledge and the speaker in the back let's not talk about the God particle because it's not. But why, and you said it yourself, why do we have to spend so much time interpreting the Bible? What is special about that book that is different than anything else?
Special.
I mean, that's the point. We should not waste our time trying to interpret what people who didn't even know there were dinosaurs or the Earth orbited the sun or that evolution happened. Why should we try and interpret those ignorant beliefs in a modern world where we actually understand things? What scientists hope for and what science does for us, and what I hope every student and every person experiences once in their life, is to have something they deeply believe in that's at the heart of their being, that without it they wouldn't feel they were human, proved to be wrong. It happens to me every day as a scientist, and that opens your mind. And so the point is that I'm ready to change my views the minute nature tells me that. And if we all were willing to change our minds when we were proved wrong, the world would be a better place. But there is a simpler answer, and the answer is we're descended from a common ancestor. We're not descended from modern apes. We have a common ancestor, and it's not as I said, it's like Bernowski's thing. It's not a question of choosing to believe. It's like choosing to believe if I walk out the 10th floor of a window that I can walk. No. We are descended from a common ancestor. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the point is that belief is, I don't believe in anything. I asked the question, you know, how did we arise here? And in fact, what's remarkable is that I've discovered that from studying science, that in fact humans evolved from earlier species of animals, and that life originated as chemistry turned into biology, and then in fact a whole universe can arise from nothing. I just wrote a book about it without any divine intervention. So all I can say is I don't see any evidence of God. I don't see any evidence that there's a teapot orbiting Jupiter. I can't prove that there isn't. But since I don't see any evidence for God in any of my studies of science, the question is irrelevant. If tomorrow, as I've often said, I can't disprove God, I would be presumptuous of me. You can't prove it in the negative. I can't disprove the existence of purpose in the universe. If tonight the stars realigned and said in Aramaic or Hebrew or you pick your language, I am here, you know what? I'd say, hey, there's something to that.
Right,
but in the absence of that, all I can say is I don't need that hypothesis in order to understand the universe. And so I'll just ignore it for the moment. That's all. I can't say, if there's evidence for purpose, I would be the first person to be excited about it, because what scientists want to do every day is not have a unified, you want to go into work every day and prove your colleagues wrong, because that's how you become famous. I do think there's great evidence. Religion has pervaded all of human society throughout all of human history. There's clearly something ingrained, either in an evolutionary sense or a neurophysiological sense, in the need to believe in something bigger than ourselves. And to deny that is to deny the evidence of reality. That's absolutely true. But just because we all share that doesn't mean it's true. It just means that we have an ingrained need to believe that. We have so I think the recognition that religious belief is universal is really important to understand if you want to understand human beings, and if you want to understand how to move to a world where we can address the problems that xenophobia is ingrained in biological systems, that in and out systems, us versus you. All of these things have a sound evolutionary basis, but if we want to be a human society and work together, we have to understand that basis so we can move beyond it. Actually, I agree with the rabbi that, in fact, religion, I do think, is responsible, at least in Europe, for the rise of science. And there's nothing wrong about that. That's fine. And it's a rise of the Enlightenment. And the reason was it was the only game in town. It was the National Science Foundation of the 14th century. But
at least we agree on something.
Yeah. No, that's right. And so, but that's fine. And it led to something that's remarkable, and we should thank it and move on. The question of morality, which you really raise in some sense, or utility, is an interesting and a deep question, which really requires a lot more discussion. But I think the statement made that people don't kill me because they believe in God, I think few people in this room, although it's not so clear after this debate, but few people in this room would say if they didn't believe in God, would they shoot me? I think almost most of the people in this room would say no. I've asked that to audiences only once or twice that people put up there and said yes. But so I think there are other reasons that people have morality. In fact, if we want to seek morality, I happen to personally think that the Bible, certainly the Old Testament, is where the Ten Commandments are written, is one of the worst places to look. There was no problem with slewing the firstborn child of an entire civilization, or giving your daughters out to be raped because you don't want men to be raped. And so I don't think that's really a morality. But the final thing I think I'll say, and I think it's really important, this humility thing that you brought up, and I think it's an important part of the Buddhist tradition that I admire. But I think it's I should listen more, and I try as I get older. Thinking less is something I never want to do. And I do think that ultimately science is the most humble activity. Assuming the universe is made for us is not humble. Assuming that we're an insignificant bit of our marvelous universe and we make the most of it as we can is humble.
Thanks for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. You can also check out my website at answersandinsanity.com and check out the t-shirts we have for sale. We've got lots of atheist apparel at thatdamnatheist.com.
Assuming the universe is made for us is not humble. Assuming that we're an insignificant bit of our marvelous universe and we make the most of it as we can is humble.